IVM.
The education system in India is designed to work only for a few. There's been a joke going around the internet in the last few weeks. Padhega India, to badhega America. In some ways, it's a poignant reminder to the inequity in the Indian education system. A system which in many ways has been elitist. How can education work for the everyday India? Learning and edtech have been the buzzwords through the last 18 months. It's easy to understand that a bulk of population sitting at home would like to upgrade their skills and take to online learning. But would this continue once we return to our offices and our colleges? Today's youth have a lesser attention span. They take 5 seconds to judge if someone is entertaining or not. They want snappy content. Yet, on the other hand, we have the same bunch binge watching Netflix series for 10 hours straight. Are our learning methodologies evolving to this taste and consumption behavior? Short versus long form, online versus offline. What are the best methods to learning today? Welcome to Speak Easy with Dheeraj Sinha, and today I'm talking to Akshay Munjal, the CEO and founder of Hero Wired, an edtech venture from the Hero Group. Hero Wired enables professionals and aspirants to transform their education journey into real-world job opportunities. Akshay has played a vital role in transforming the landscape of Indian education and training since 2008. He has been an integral part of the BML Munjal University. Akshay, welcome to Speak Easy with Dheeraj Sinha.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Dheeraj.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this conversation. So Akshay, let's dive straight in, right? I mean, I want to pick up on the conversation which has been around on the internet over the development of the last few weeks, right? And the meme which is going around, which says "Ki padhega India to badhega America."
Mm-hmm.
And we've all been thinking that the whole education strategy for India of investing in really high-end education systems, whether you look at the IITs, IIMs, JNUs, right? Has it been very elitist? Have we rather invested to a extreme top end of the pyramid, right? And in some ways, it's working more for others than it's working for us. And now that the tech environment is opening up and people like yourself are going big time into covering the skill gap and so on and so forth, I wanted to pick your brains on what do you think has been with our the way we've thought through education in this country, both in terms of top of the pyramid and education versus skill learning development programs. And what are your thoughts on that piece?
And a great point, Dheeraj. And if I look at it, there are essentially 2 or 3 big things you're making, the points you're making. First point is a lot of Indian talent is now heading large tech giants in the US and globally. The second point you're making is our IITs, IIMs, IISc, have they become somewhat elitist now? And third, overall tech and skilling in India. If I look at it, talent from IITs, IIMs has been going broad since early 70s. It's not a new trend. This brain drain has been happening. There was a joke I remember in 70s or 80s when the whole batch of IIT, the whole class used to go and get jobs in the US. And there used to be an odd one out of saying, oh, you decided to stay in India.
Yeah.
That being said, there are large Indian companies also which are headed by alums of these institutions. So these are fantastic institutions with extremely tight filters. Their entry criteria, if I look at for an IIT, selection ratio is less than 0.3%. Now imagine if for every 100 aspirants, you are selecting 0.3. That's a kind of strong entry filter. They have fantastic faculty pool and they've done a phenomenal job. So I think full credit to the system of producing great talent. But I think the problem is, how do we go beyond these? How do we go beyond the institutes of eminence? And I think it's high time that the government should reprioritize. We've got a good thing going on the top. IITs, IIMs, IISc are recognized globally. But what about our tier 2 institutions? And that's where bulk of our students are sitting, in tier 2, tier 3. Until we don't channel some of the money which is going to these institutes of eminence into fixing tier 2, tier 3, we'll always have a problem that the topmost, you have extremely bright, talented young people who are doing fantastically well. And the reality is, a lot of people migrate to the West, and they migrate for overall quality of life, standard of living, companies, whatnot, whatnot. So that's something which we cannot fix overnight. It'll take India some time to be able to tell its people that I'll give you a equivalent or a somewhat equivalent quality of life if I were to compare with any of the Western countries. But what instead we should do is focus on fixing our tier 2 institutions, tier 2 and tier 3, because that's where your average is sitting. And it's true today, you look at most large American tech companies are headed by people of Indian origin. And I was reading this figure that Indians know how to work with less. Somebody put it very nicely. Indians are trained to do more with less. And that's why, whether India or abroad, they flourish.
Yeah. So Akshay, your own philosophy at Hero Wired, right? It's all about tier 2, tier 3. It is in the space of bridging the skill gap for India, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. I mean, what really is the gap that you think institution like yourself are fulfilling, and what more needs to be done at that level?
See, Dheeraj, what we are trying to address the very critical gap. We look at this whole audience of saying, irrespective of where you are sitting, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 location, what we really look at is, if you want to learn cutting edge skills, today who's teaching you those skills in a very organized manner, which is benchmarked with the best in the world? And I think what we like to call this India model, where how do you bring the best education available to India? Till now, we were talking about IITs. You had the best quality of education for a handful of people. Now, how do you take a level of quality of education of that level, and how do you bring that to masses? And that's really what Hero Wide is about. So we are working with some of the leading universities globally. We bring in their content, and we know that nothing beats live delivery. That whole example I give. There are many videos out there how to swim or how to drive a car by watching a video, but not really advisable. You don't tell anybody, watch a YouTube video and then go jump in the pool the next day, or watch 100 videos and start driving a car. So for us, that's what we do. We take deep skills and we have real instructors who are more of guide by your side, who will walk you through the journey, who will make sure you are learning. So irrespective of which location you are in, as long as you have the hunger and desire to learn, that is what Hero Wire does.
Akshay, also, I wanted to talk about, your initial foray was building a BML university, and now you are into the edtech. So education seems to be a large part of your vision, right? And obviously this space is growing in a big way. So apart from the Hero Wired piece and apart from the skill gap, how are you seeing this whole space as a business professional, and what are your visions in this space overall?
Dheeraj, I've been in this space now for nearly 14 years.
Yeah.
I started my career with Hero MindMine, and from MindMine, the idea of the university germinated, and from university, Hero Wired. And to me, it's like a natural progression. Think of it like this. When you started shopping, the first thing you did was you went to your neighborhood store and you bought your things, and you did that for very long. Suddenly you had tech come in. You had the likes of Amazon, Flipkart, and whatnot. Today, you have the world. You literally have anything and everything sitting on your cell phone. And I think education is going down that route. Over the last 14 years, I remember in Hero MindMine, everything was physical. Nobody had heard of virtual. Yeah. We used to give learners physical books. There used to be a physical teacher at a physical center. Now, with the advent of technology, the learner could be anywhere, even at Hero Wired. We have learners from, a remote part in Bihar to somebody in Andhra. It just opens up the world. And I think more and more, education will also open up. Why just India? Today, if somebody can offer you the best, if you have a best faculty sitting, whether somewhere in US, UK, or wherever on a subject, as a learner, why shouldn't you have access to that? Mm-hmm. Why should I tell an Indian, no, you can only have access to this faculty only, while everything else we do is international. Everything else we do, Indians, our aspiration is to be best in the world. And I think education is very fundamental. You know, that whole earlier joke of roti kapda makan. Today,
Yeah.
nobody talks roti kapda makan anymore. That's given. The next big thing is education. Education, skilling, upskilling. That's also fundamentally important. We have a right to education in this country. One of the few countries which has a right to education. So to me, we have all of this. Now the only thing is, how do you take it at a global scale and benchmark with the best globally? And
Mm.
imagine the change one can bring, Dheeraj. Suddenly you're saying you're taking somebody sitting in a tier 3, tier 4 city or town in India, and you are telling him or her, listen, you are going to learn from the best globally.
Yeah.
You are no constrained by your geography. You're no more constrained by your means. You're no more constrained by your, you may not have cracked the IIT or the CAT, but you'll get the best education. And moment you do that at scale, to me, I think that's going to be the next big revolution in the country. We talk about, the white revolution, the green revolution. I think the next big revolution would be education. We are already in the tech revolution.
Yeah. Well, this is such an awesome purpose, Akshay. The democratization of education, because education is mobility. It moves you up, personal, social, economic ladder in a huge way. And what you're doing is you're putting all of India, as I say, on one table, right? Everybody has access to the same. So in that sense, in fact, breaking a huge class divide in the country using education and technology. Also, Akshay, I mean, what comes to my mind is that you obviously come from a legacy family of the Hero Group conglomerate, has hands in many pies. What brought you to this? What brought you to technology, new age, education?
To me, Dheeraj, it seemed like a very obvious choice. Something as fundamental as education. It's not kept up with times.
Yeah,
If you look at how everything else has changed, it's tremendous progress, whether as a country or as a civilization, humans have made. But education being so fundamental, we were still following the model which Oxford started 900 years ago. One teacher in class, 60 students, everybody learns the same thing at the same time, same pace. Everybody is evaluated for the same thing. We've been copying that system for centuries. And we all know there are no two human beings alike. The way you learn or the way I learn could be very different.
yeah,
Speed of learning, style of learning, how you like to be assessed. Also, what you want to learn, what I want to learn could be very different. But what we had done over the last millennia, taken a very cookie cutter approach. Every student in class till 10th class learn the same thing. You come to 11th class, you choose medical, non-medical, commerce, arts, you learn the same thing there. Then you go to college, you'll choose BTech, BBA, BCom, BA. You'll all learn the same thing in BTech. You'll all learn the same thing in BBA or LLB. Today, it just doesn't work. Imagine something so fundamental as education
yeah,
has not kept up with time. The moment you make a change there, to me, it just seems so obvious. Why? It was when I came back, and to be honest, Dheeraj, I'm a finance student. I studied my
mm,
undergrad finance. I worked in banking in the US. So I thought I'll be doing something in the financial world.
yeah,
Came back more by destiny, looked at education, and it just baffled me. Why is nobody doing anything in education, especially for a country of India's size? We have the youngest young population in the world, which means a lot of us out there who have aspirations to build a life or to achieve their dreams. And if you can't cater to that audience, our demographic dividend will become into a demographic nightmare.
yeah.
There was really no choice. It just seemed so obvious that education being so fundamental to people, why are we not keeping it up to times? And that's essentially what Hero Wired is trying to do. To say, you know what, you could be anywhere. If you want to learn cutting edge skills, forget your background, what you've done in college, forget where you are. As long as you have the desire and aptitude and are willing to work hard, we will work with you and we will teach you.
Yeah, yeah. And when you look at Akshay, when you look at the journey of Wired so far, what do you look back and say from a proud perspective that yeah, this is good? I mean, we've come some distance on this. A and B, what are you looking at? In near future, what are the plans about Wired that you can talk to us about?
I think what I'm very satisfied about Wired Dheeraj is the company started in April 13th. And from April, we've had to actually sit in September and say, let's revise the plan upwards. That's the kind of
Awesome.
response we got. So we've done one exercise in September that we have to revise the plan, everything upward. Then we're doing another one in January. Okay, now we did that in September, but now we need to further revise that. So it's we are somewhat humbled by the kind of trust we are getting from people and the age group. We have learners right from 20 to 50. We have a father-son in the program. We have a husband-wife doing a program. The age group is huge, which just tells me something. If you have a good program, people want to learn, people want to upskill. They just need the right avenues. So with Wired, currently we have three verticals in the company, which we do B2C, B2B, where we work with companies, and B2I, where we work with colleges and institutions. And the next thing we want to do is how do we further go deep in all these three verticals? What we are finding is that when we work in B2B or in a B2C, today most companies come to tell us and say, I'm not able to find adequate talent. That you please find people, train them, we'll happily take them. And no blanket on number. If you
Wow.
can 100, 500, 1,000, we'll take 1,000 people. That's the kind of demand which is coming from industry for trained manpower. So think of it. You got company who's saying, just give me trained people, as many as you can. Similarly, you have India where you're saying, young people are not getting meaningful jobs. So somebody, when you solve the problem in a correct manner, imagine the how large the opportunity is.
Yeah,
And
I
that,
mean, no, you're so right. I mean, it's true of our category as well, right? I mean, one of the biggest things we've identified for this year is capacity building, right? If we don't have capacity in terms of people and talent, the business is there, right? But if you don't have capacity, you won't be able to tap. So I'm totally with you on saying that talent is the biggest game in India, right? Supply side and
true.
yeah.
You
No,
take the
that's
example of tech talent. You can't read the paper without every day there's some article or the other talks about shortage of tech talent.
mm,
And today technology is used everywhere. Difficult to find a company or an organization which says, I don't use tech. And tech is only growing. It's becoming even more, as a part of our life, more pervasive in our life. It's getting shaped in every aspect. So how do we train people for tech? How do we train people for what industry wants and what industry will need tomorrow? You look at some of the newer programs like 5G, big data is already there. There are lots of areas where there's demand already coming.
Yeah, and while at this, actually, I also wanted to talk to you a bit about certifications versus skills. Right, I mean, India's always been a market where we've chased certification, we've chased institutes. Right, where have you studied from is far more important than what have you studied or what have you gathered. Are you seeing a shift there, both in terms of people's attitudes and organizations' attitude? Are we somewhere midway there? Where do you think we are on that axis?
I think Dheeraj, great question. And I've also been pondering about this. You think of it, why were people using it was easy. If you told someone I am studied from XYZ Institute, the person didn't have to apply their mind and said, oh, you studied from Harvard, he or she must be smart. You studied from IIT Bombay, you'll be very bright. So
Yeah,
people just use that as a shortcut or as a while if you look at the area of skills, if I told you I'm a great HR professional or a great marketing professional, I couldn't, how do I prove that to you in half an hour or 1 hour or 2 hours? Versus today, you look at people are today because everything is easy to assess, especially in technology. Today, most companies, even Google for that matter, what they do, I'll give you a live example now what Google does, which will help answer your question. What Google used to do earlier was they used to only go to a handful of institutions in India and to
yeah,
say, I will go recruit from these guys. Then they decided, why am I doing that? So they made this online hackathon and they opened it to every college student in India and said, here's a hackathon. I will give you 3 coding problems in a closed, of course, in a monitored environment. Out of 3, you crack 1 or 2. I'll just, no matter where you are from, which college you are in, whether you are college also or not even educated, if you crack my problem, I will take you for the next round of interview. So look at it. Google earlier said, oh no, I'll go to IIT or I'll go to Harvard or Stanford abroad. They were using what earlier the traditional approach that
yeah,
somebody's already done the filter for me. I know students are smart here. Versus the new approach to say, I'm going to put out a test or coding test out there. Whoever can crack it, I'll have a chat with you. So suddenly the pool becomes so much, becomes huge. And then suddenly every learner has an equal shot of getting into it.
yeah.
And more, I think skills are going to go that way. That today, it doesn't matter what degree you have, your certificate you have. It'll become irrelevant. Companies are saying, can you solve a problem for me? You may have 5 degrees, you may have a PhD from this place, but can you solve a problem for me or not is what I'm interested in. So this shift, which has happened in the last 3 to 5 years, will have very far-reaching consequences. Suddenly, every company will just say, there is no restriction on where I recruit from. And a
Yeah.
list will say, it doesn't matter which college I go to. If I've got the skills and I've worked hard and I've built skills, I have an equal shot as anybody else.
Yeah.
So earlier, the ivory towers which were created, which had become like closed ecosystems. You went to Harvard, there were certain companies who came to Harvard, and because you were Harvard, they were going to recruit you from Harvard because you're a Harvard alum. That ivory tower shatters.
Yeah. I think also it helps because a lot of the skills that the technology world demands are pretty measurable and accessible. Right. I mean, you can give a small assignment and you can check whether the person can crack it or not. I think that's also a big catalyst in this.
Absolutely, that you can easily give a coding problem. But
Yeah.
even other areas, what we are finding, even in areas like finance,
Mm.
even in finance, we are seeing people are giving problems or giving case studies because companies also have realized, I want people to solve my problem. I don't want just somebody with a fancy degree and saying, listen, I got a degree, but I don't know how to apply it. Because the
Yeah.
underlying point is knowledge versus application. I may have the knowledge of something, but do I have the skill to apply it?
Yeah.
So companies today want skills. Today, also, if you look at, I can literally Google pretty much everything under the sun, right from how to bake a cake, to drive a car, to fly a plane. If I Google, I'm sure it'll be available online. That's knowledge part. But what companies is, you have the skill. Are you a good driver?
Yeah.
Are you a good cook? Are you a good pilot? That is where skills come in. So that is
Yeah.
what companies are checking today.
Excellent. This is a great conversation. Actually, we'll take a quick break and we come back and talk a little bit more about how learning overall as an idea is developing in the country, and we'll pick your brains on that. So we're
Look
going to a
forward to it.
quick break.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun Dugirala talks to Divyanshu Damani, co-founder and CEO at Tag Mango. The two discuss how content creators can monetize their content going beyond the traditional ads and brand deals. On The Habit Coach, Ashton is in conversation with Ashna Modi, clinical psychologist at ASA Wellness. They discuss the habit of deservability and gratitude. On Probation Se Promotion Tak, host Abhinav talks about business networking and teaches us how to enhance those networking skills. On The Longest Constitution, Priya gives us a peek into the history of caste-based discrimination and how our constitution is committed to overcoming that. And on The Musafir Stories, the hosts are joined by author and poet Mihir Vatsa. They discover the plateau town of Hazaribagh. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And also do check out our YouTube channels. We have a number of them. You can get them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And remember, if you're enjoying this show, or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. It really does help us spread the word. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors for the network this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Intel, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Akshay, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, Akshay, I wanted to shift gears a bit, and I wanted to talk about youth as an audience today, which is a large part of EdTech as well. Almost pretty much everything that we kind of target in India. And there are two polar opposite kind of point of views when it comes to youth, right? One is that, they need snappy content. They don't have too much of mind space, right? If you look at the way social media is developing, 6 second on YouTube, and so on and so forth. But there's other point of view as well, right? That if the content is good, people are willing to do binge watch, right? So at one end, this whole thing of there has to be snappy and engagement. And the other people saying, time is not a problem as far as your content is compelling. When it comes to learning, right, what is the approach? I mean, in our times, we were made to sit in a 1 hour long class and we had no choice unless you wanted to make paper planes and fly around, right? So what's happening with the attention span and what impact is that happening on how we are building the learning content in today's times?
I think it's a great question, Dheeraj. I think this youth is very different from people at our times. You were talking about 1 hour. I remember my MBA, we used to have 3 to 4 hour classes. The standard MBA class used to be 3 hours
Yeah.
with a 10-minute break in the middle.
Yeah.
And But to think of it, and I look at my own children, nephews, nieces,
Yeah.
today they have, there's so much information available. Everybody has a cell phone. And the power of a cell phone, that there's so much knowledge, information available that these kids don't want more. They're like, okay, tell me quick.
Yeah.
Tell me in 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, what is important. Versus saying, you know what, read a book or sit in a lecture for 2 hours or 3 hours. Fundamentally, learning styles have changed. Learning styles have changed. You look at Netflix, you look at Amazon, everything is changing. And as a result, even in education, now what you have is called bite-sized learning. How do you teach someone some new skill? By giving them videos of 10 minutes. That every day you watch a video of 10 minutes, over time, you will learn a new skill. Your way you assess people also changing now. That in our time, you used to have the end semester exam or final exam, which used to happen, the dreaded end of the year. March, we used to have the final exams where whatever you learned in the year, somebody used to check. Today, I think that's a very outdated system. Today, I think the better way of approach is continuous evaluation, continuous feedback, which means that every class, every week, I'm checking how much have you learned. If you haven't learned, okay, let's go back where you have a problem. Rather than saying, here, learn the whole book, I'm saying learn, just understand. Also doesn't mean learning and understanding. So with the way, and all of these things, the earlier traditional approach of learning was on basic subjects. You learned history, you learned about a civilization, and then you were asked critical dates. Today, people say, does it really matter in which year or what was the exact date where Aurangzeb died? But I at least to know what was good and bad about Aurangzeb. What is more important? Today, do I need to know mental math when I have access to a cell phone which has a calculator? Those things were important when you didn't have a calculator by your side, when you didn't have books so readily available. Today, I have a calculator in my pocket, which is my cell phone. Today, I need to know why were things important or significant and what impact they had versus to learn the exact date or year of something. So fundamentally, even whole approach to things are changing.
Yeah. No, it's also very interesting. You're saying the assessment earlier was, a way of labeling people. Oh, you're an A grader, B grader, you're top of class, you're bottom of class. I think what you're saying very interestingly is that assessment is a way of testing your learning. And then there's a loop that you haven't learned it, you can go back and learn it. So it's part of the loop, feedback loop, rather than a part of a class system that you're creating, which is awesome as well.
Correct. And it was, think of it where Dheeraj came from. This system which we follow actually originated from Oxford. At that time, you had limited teachers. And that time, their whole approach was, I have limited faculty or teachers. How do I teach people basic skills and how do I standardize them? So as a result, you said, if I need to standardize everything and I have limited resources, let me just check them once a year. So that my load is lower and I'm checking everybody on the same thing. That means I set one question paper. Now, back in the day, there were not that many teachers, simply. There were not that many people who could teach you different skills. So that was the need of the hour at that time. That's why things standardized. Now, if you take even a step forward, if you go backwards from there, in India, when you had the Gurukul system, the guru was responsible for your overall development, not just emotional, physical, your intellectual. And they were responsible for 24 hours giving you feedback, looking at overall. Now, when this system of education came, which said, I'm sorry, and even in Guru, you had one Guru to a handful of students, versus saying, now I have one teacher who has to train 60 or 80 classes, 80 students, and do that 5 or 6 times a day. I need to standardize. Otherwise, the teacher just can't handle it. So that is how these originated. They were correct at that time. But we've evolved from there.
Yeah. Actually, also, in India, we've typically had waves, right? So there was a doctor and engineer wave, and then there came the MBA wave, right? There's also been the whole tech wave to say, everybody wants to become a computer science engineer and a programmer and so on and so forth. At Hero Wired, and from your perspective, I mean, do you guys have any sense of what are the skills of tomorrow? I mean, are you betting on what would be? And also, I'm asking this question in the context where there's also fear, right? People are saying AI will take away half the jobs of today, right? I mean, actuarial science will not exist because AI will do better underwriting than anybody, and so on and so forth. So, are there any prognosis on and what does the future look like in terms of skill sets and the kind of abilities that tomorrow will require?
Dheeraj, I read a book called Industries of Tomorrow by Alec Ross. In that book, he argues that what you're saying that going forward, there'll be two kinds of jobs left. One will be really at the top end, where you need thinking abilities and ability to work with various people. And you'll have the job sitting at the bottom, things like plumber, sweeper, chef, which will never get replaced by AI.
Mm, mm,
Now, this is this gentleman's thesis that you will have these two buckets which will sit. What is going to happen to the job in the middle? Anything which is mundane, which is routine, a computer can be taught.
yeah.
For example, evaluation. We were talking about the evaluation system. AI can easily be taught how to check assessment papers.
Mm,
They can easily be taught. You don't need a human to do that. Now, for that, AI can replace. But can a AI motivate somebody? Can
mm,
AI respond to how your emotions are? Can he or she really be a guide by your side?
mm,
Unlikely. So, which is, I also agree with that line of thought that more and more you'll have jobs at the top and you'll have jobs at the bottom. The middle is the one which is going to be threatened.
mm,
Now, the way out of this is how do you continuously keep reskilling? And when I say the people who are threatened are the ones who've not changed with times. Anything which
mm.
a basic AI can do or a basic machine can do, the question is, do you need a human to do it? Now, that is the question that I think that people need to ask themselves. If I'm doing something which can be replaced, what more can I do differently? And yes, this trend will further accelerate. We're already seeing that.
Mm,
Today, you think of it, so many, I'm just giving you the example of checking question papers. AI is already doing it. Look at invigilation. There is AI which is already doing your eyeball tracking.
mm.
So when we assess students online, the computer gets locked. We are tracking the eyeballs of a learner. If he pulls out a phone from the side to Google an answer, AI will know.
Amazing.
Each learner, you can do that.
Wow.
So that is the direction technology will move. But I think what we are excited about and what people should really learn is more something more fundamental, the ability to learning how to learn.
Yeah.
That is something more fundamental. Ability to communicate well, ability to work with different people. I think those are the softer aspects which are not given enough importance. If I know how to work with others, I can motivate others, I can solve problems, I can think laterally because AI will only think in one direction because you have to feed the machine to only do this and that
Yeah.
machine will follow that straight line.
Yeah.
Anywhere where things are horizontal or which cut across different disciplines, AI can't do that. So I would really encourage people to take the time, invest on themselves, learn to communicate well, get a broad based education, and learn a few tech skills. This is something which Bill Gates had said, I think 10 or 15 years ago. He said, today, I tell one advice I give to schools, this is Bill Gates, it doesn't matter whether you know history or geography, just teach your children coding. And I think he said this
Mm.
10 or 15 years ago. And we are seeing that come true now because coding is going to become the very basic fundamental skill required.
Yeah. And the most interesting thing I pick up, Akshay, is that ability to learn continuously, right? I mean, in our times, it was like your OS was loaded in you in the first few years and you stayed with that OS, right? But today you have to keep upgrading, right? You have to keep changing, you have to keep learning. And this idea of continuous learning is the most fundamental shift in education, learning, and training, I would say.
I agree because in our time, it was that, you finish education, you start working, and that's what your life is. I think it'll become very different because technology is changing so rapidly. I think what's going to happen is after school, you will, unlike you go to college for 3 or 4 years, it will not be a straight line. You'll go to college for a year or two, work for a year or two, come back to college, pick up a new skill, college or anywhere online, pick up a new skill, work, come back. That
Mm,
relation will become far more interwoven. It is not
mm,
going to be a handshake like it used to be earlier. That you finish your education, start a job, and that your relationship
yeah.
with education or learning is over. Technology is going to change so rapidly that what you've learned 3 years ago, 4 years ago will become redundant today.
Mm.
You got to keep upskilling. So this whole relation, people will keep going back and forth, keep learning, work, learn, work. Will
Yeah.
become far more embedded.
Yeah. It's amazing and scary at the same time. I want to talk to you about technologies, staying on that topic, right? I mean, across categories, say retail, marketing, so on and so forth. I mean, the newer technologies which are, redefining how we are working. So AR, VR, AI, we spoke about a bit, chatbots, and so on and so forth. What role do you think are these technologies playing in education and learning? And is there more scope there? I mean, for example, could you use AR, VR to do mixed learning, or is that still too far off? Where do you think we are on that curve, and what developments are you seeing there?
I think Dheeraj, today at the pace of change, I think nothing is too far off. I think when we make our plans, we call 2 year a long-term plan, which we also
Yeah.
don't know. We make 6 monthly plans. I
Yeah.
think the way things are changing, it's only a matter of time. AR, VR will become mainstream.
Hmm.
The technologies we are using today for evaluation or assessments or invigilation, all have been around for 10 years. It's just because of the pandemic, they've come in the mainstream.
Yeah.
Similarly, AR, VR, there's so much work happening on AR, VR that it'll just make learning far easier. Think of it like this. If you're teaching somebody engineering and you want to teach them engine for a motorcycle, here
Yeah.
you can, through AR, VR, you can expand the engine. You can expand every component of the engine. The learner can literally touch, feel, turn, move it around, try and assemble it together.
Hmm.
So your requirement of physical infrastructure would really go down and learning would become far more engaged. We're going back to the basic principle of learn by doing. It's one of the oldest philosophies of learning, learn by doing. And that's really what AR, VR will unlock.
Yeah, no, I was talking to Rajesh Jejurikar from Mahindra and Mahindra, and he told us that during the pandemic, one of the big pieces of machinery which they had imported was actually installed right through AR VR guidance that they got from their partners internationally. So it was installed from remote with the help of the people on ground here. So some of that, obviously, what you're talking about is beginning to happen already.
Think of it, before COVID, they would have logically sent a technician or a team of technicians to install the machine. Now, because of COVID, they did it virtually. Now, going forward, that team may end up saying, I don't need to have people globally. I may just have 3 or 4 people who are very good at this. They could be sitting anywhere in the world and they'll be able to install this for all my clients globally.
Yeah.
So suddenly the business model changes.
Yeah. And that's a good segue actually into my next question, where, obviously COVID accelerated a lot of things, right? It accelerated digital payments, it's accelerated e-commerce. It's obviously had a huge impact on your industry in terms of learning, right? I mean, all our kids are still pretty much learning from remote and so much and so on and so forth. But we are also somewhere realizing that collaboration, face to face, I mean, the skills that you gain from social skills, etc., which is also important. What do you think is going to be the tragedy? Do you feel that once schools open up, hopefully Omicron is not as dangerous as it sounded to begin with? Do you think the progress that we've made on EdTech, do you think it'll spring back? Do you think it'll get accelerated? Where's your mind on that piece?
Not at all. It's convenience. Today, when physical stores opened, did people stop shopping online? Not really. It's a convenience. See, what does online education do? It gives you a convenience factor. Today, I look at my children's own school. Pollution increased in Delhi. There's no problem. We shut schools. We'll do it virtually. Next time something else happens, it gets too hot, too cold, too polluted. The first reaction would be, yeah, let's shift virtually. So suddenly you opened up a whole new option which never existed earlier. Before March 2020, very few of us had actually heard of Zoom.
Yeah.
And today it's become a way of life because it's convenient. People could be sitting anywhere. Similarly with education or edtech, now when people are already used to saying, I'm used to learning from the best. If I'm used to learning from the best, sitting at the comfort of my own home at a time which suits me, at a cost which I can relate to, that power of convenience is far more than anything else. It's an option out there.
Yeah.
And I think same thing will happen at work. When offices reopen, would we expect 100% of people to be back 100% of the time? No, we've all figured out, hybrid work can work. People can be home, they can come in on pre-agreed days, balance, they can be home. So the economy is changing. When that happens, which means that you need less office spaces, which means you may have fewer people buying cars. Earlier, I had to buy a car, I had to drive to work and come back. Today I'm saying, listen, if I'm going to drive to work 1 day a week or 2 days a week, do I really need to buy a car? So imagine the tectonic shifts which are happening underneath all of this. And the impact is going to be huge. People start questioning, do I need to, earlier people used to come from rural to urban to work. People used to migrate in India from tier 2, tier 3 cities to tier 1 and find places to stay in PGs, all kinds of things. Today they're saying, you know what, I can be in my hometown. Families can be together. So lots of shift is underway.
Yeah, and as you say that it will be and rather than or. So we will add these newer models and newer methods to our lives and optimize it for better rather than going back completely or shifting completely. It will be combination, and that would be a better life form, I would imagine.
I mean, people have just realized convenience suddenly because and if you look at history also, after every pandemic, after every catastrophe, there has been a golden boom period because people suddenly realized in every catastrophe and started questioning, why was I doing that thing earlier? Because before that, everybody continued as life as always. And suddenly when a catastrophe hit, people started re-questioning everything. People re-questioning the purpose of life, re-questioning work, re-questioning what they do with themselves. Everything was being questioned. And suddenly when you go through this whole questioning exercise, and then you come and say, you know what, there is another way of doing things. And this shift is massive. Look at this whole shift of IC to EV engine. I don't know. EV is the oldest technology. EV came before the IC engine. So the first cars in the world were EVs.
Wow.
Yeah. We started off with EVs. We went to IC because that was supposed to be a better technology. And now from IC, we're going back to EVs because we think that's better now.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. You're right. I mean, big fundamental shifts are happening and interesting times. Akshay, we work with a lot of startups and a lot of our clients now are preparing for IPO, right? I mean, unicorn is a big word in the business space, right? Where are you in that space of, the whole race to be a unicorn in the shortest period of time and the whole mad rush for valuations and funding? How do you see yourself and Hero Wired in that game?
I think, Dheeraj, that's all vanity. End of the day, those are vanity. To me, cash in the bank is the reality.
Amazing.
So we come from a traditional family business where we don't understand these fancy valuations. What we understand is top line and bottom line, which is cash in the bank. And to my mind, all long-term fundamental businesses are built that way. You have periods where there's a lot of froth and excitement and bubble, which corrects itself over time. But what remains consistently is fundamentally strong, solid businesses. That's how businesses which have survived for generations have been built on those principles. And to me, Wired is also the same. We are not doing this to get a huge valuation or raise a ton of money and say, for me, the bigger purpose is, are we impacting people's lives? Are we making a change in how Indians learn? Are we helping bridge the gap of people finding jobs and what companies are looking for? Those to me are more fundamental, bigger problems. Those are the ends. Valuation, unicorn they are not a means or an end. Anything. Those are just vanity. What is the fundamental problem you are solving? You solve that problem well enough, you do it efficiently, yes, you'll become a unicorn. Great. You never set out to do that. You set out to solve a problem. And if you solve it in the most efficient manner, that is what I think will build a long-lasting business.
Yeah, I mean, I would say fairly contrarian point of view in this environment, but I do agree with you that finally I think unit economics will raise its head and questions will be asked on how this money flow is being used. Though I also believe that there's a room for in this whole free flow of capital which is happening and its role in helping people scale up, but at the same time doing it in the right way, not doing it for, as you're saying, vanity metrics. Absolutely. And shifting gears a bit, Akshay, I want to ask a few personal questions in terms of, I mean, you're obviously running so much, right? Running organization, building this through the pandemic. How do you keep your head on its shoulders? I mean, how do you maintain your sanity? What do you do? What do you tell yourself every morning?
I think for me, Dheeraj, tennis has been a huge blessing. These days, unfortunately, because of the pollution, I'm not able to play it.
Yeah.
But from Feb to October, at least 4 times a week, sorry, I play tennis. And that has, after a good game, it suddenly seems your problems disappear. To
Yeah.
me, it has some sort of a meditative impact.
Yeah.
I think tennis and the other thing which I wish I had started earlier was actual meditation and
Amazing.
basic meditation. It just helps you calm down, helps you become less reactive. Because in this environment, in a young company which is growing rapidly, there is so much energy, so much excitement. How do you take a deep breath and say, listen, I want to focus on the basics?
Yeah.
And that is what I think meditation calms you down. You don't end up making decisions, you don't end up making impulsive decisions. You don't react instantly. So to me, I think tennis and meditation have been a huge blessing.
Yeah. And what's your approach to failures? I mean, how do you navigate setbacks or failures or
I think failures are today, if you don't fail enough, I think you're doing something wrong.
Hmm.
There is no better teacher than a failure. And when I look at young college students or pass outs or people who are trying, entrepreneurship, getting their hands in startups, I keep telling them the only difference is between a successful entrepreneur and a not successful entrepreneur is how do you deal with failure. I'm yet to meet someone who's saying I've never failed in my life. And when you look at any successful entrepreneur, the number of times they've failed, the setbacks they've had, is just, I think failure is like, is that is like a sandpaper which is continuously grinding you.
Hmm.
And the more you get grinded, the smoother you get.
Hmm.
And the less afraid you become. Otherwise, in your mind, if you think, and the other thing I think fundamentally, in India, failure is considered a bad word.
Yeah.
While I was in US last to last year in San Francisco, they actually celebrate failure. In
Yeah.
those cases, I was talking to a friend of mine who works for a VC fund. He's like, we like to fund companies where the founders failed earlier
Hmm.
versus companies where founders not never failed. In their mindset is if you failed, that means you tried something new.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, okay, you tried something new. Tell me what you tried, why it didn't work as per you, what would you do differently? Now, if
Yeah.
somebody articulate that well and saying, here is what I tried, here is why I think it didn't work, and here is what I would do differently. That to me is priceless experience.
Yeah.
Have to hire people like that for our company so that they've already gone through failure and they've
Yeah.
already tried things, so they're bringing that knowledge.
Yeah.
And no substitute to failure. It's a great leveler.
No, absolutely.
I think we should, as a civilization or as a society, we should celebrate failure more.
Yeah.
We have all these awards for people who succeeded. I would
Yeah.
love to see an award which says, here the gentleman who tried 5 or 10 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
After that is real tenacity. Trying 5 or 10 different things, still trying.
Yeah. In fact, in my earlier agency, we used to have an award called Heroic Failure Award.
Okay.
So it'd be given to a person who tried really, really something really bold and failed big time on that. So no, you're right. It's absolutely a fundamental anchor of the culture to build. Akshat, thank you so much for such a deep, enriching conversation. And if I might say a few contrarian point of views, a lot to think about. So thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. And this is where we take a break and turn the mic around. So we give you the mic to grill me back.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dheeraj. Appreciate it.
Take a quick break and come back.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market, and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Dugirala. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from.
Love to ask you how you got into this. You were in a big company. What prompted you to switch and try your hand at something totally different?
So, I've always been a strategist all my life, right? And the job that I'm doing now is running a company, P&L, right? And I was always fascinated about building a culture, right? So while I was a deep domain expertise and I would do brand strategy and so on and so forth, but I always felt that the system could be engineered in a different way. And for a long time, I tried shooting on somebody else's shoulder, and I figured that nobody else is going to implement your ideas. So you have to put your money where your mouth is. You have to put your skin in the game, right? And that's the point that I decided to take up the P&L job to run the company, to become the CEO, right? And try and build what we're building at Leo Burnett now. And we're doing some dramatic changes at the cultural levels around the way the business model of marketing advertising is run. And a lot of that, in fact, is now beginning to bear fruit. So it makes you feel happy that it was not all futile daydreaming. So, but yeah, really it was to come at the front, hold the gun and start shooting on your own shoulders rather than somebody else's.
Did you ever get the heroic failure award?
All the time. In fact, I have learned a lot from my mistakes, right? So early on, I launched a soap called Manjal. Okay. Right. It's a turmeric soap for Marico, and we launched it in South, right? And I was like, you can't go wrong with this, right? Turmeric in Tamil Nadu, everywhere I went, every household, they had yellow everywhere. This is a big winner, right? And it failed miserably. It failed. So we bought that brand for about 8-9 crores. The target was to get it to 15 crores. And we failed, right? Because what we did not factor in enough, Akshay, was that consumers in Tamil Nadu didn't want more of what they already have, right?
Interesting.
They wanted something. They say, Manjal is at home, right? I want to use Dove. I want to use Lux, right? So we didn't factor in enough the need for aspiration, the need for different, the need for new, and also the need for what everybody else uses, right? The brands in that category were big. Hamam or Lux, they're big brands. So I have in fact learned a lot from those mistakes. And now the model of thinking that we have at Leo Burnett, we call it a brand rocket model, is all based on those learnings, where we say that you have to be a leader brand. You can't be a small pretender challenger brand. You have to own the central course of the category, right? So these are all the learnings which have come through lots of failures of trying to be challenger and not winning it from that perspective.
How are you seeing this industry, your industry, evolve with so much disruption happening with the startups and these coming in? Are you also finding how people are communicating, especially from a marketing, branding point of view? Are you finding, is that also changing the traditional mediums?
Hugely, dramatically. And one of the biggest changes, Akshay, is that, classically we separated the idea of brand building and business, right? We said, brand we will build, and all the theories on brand were long-term, right? And it put off business people, right? Because if this is something which I have to do for someday, why do I care for it? So one of the biggest differences which is happening is that your brand building or your marketing energies can actually catapult your business. Right. So if you look at all the businesses we've helped build in last 4-5 years with Amazon, Spotify, PhonePe, Car Dekho, right? They've all scaled up as businesses, partly, credit to the marketing efforts and the brand building efforts we put in. So that's one of the biggest, most fundamental shifts to say, how can you get marketing to help scale rather than marketing as an advantage which happens in the unforeseeable long term, which none of us will see. That's one. Second, obviously, is that your canvas today is so different. It's not just words and images, right? I could come to you with a service level solve using my creativity. I could come to you with a product level solve using my creativity. So I'm saying we are a creative company and our job is to solve problems. Right. So my output is not just I will come. It's not that you'll call me and every time I come to you with a video idea, I'll come to you with a print idea. Right. I think that's the second biggest fundamental shift. And that makes my job interesting because my canvas is so wide. I can play with technology. I can play with words. I can play with images. I can play with product ideas. I can play with service innovations. So those are two big shifts I see, which is fundamentally redefining my business.
Is there any campaign, Dheeraj, where you thought, or you and the team thought, we've nailed this down, this is perfect, nothing would go wrong, but just doesn't take off? And you're sitting there scratching your head, wonder what happened. Anytime that's ever...
Lots of time. In fact, to give you an example, one of the most successful campaigns for Amazon is Aur Dikhao. right? Where we spoke about selection and we say you can't go wrong. Most successful campaign. The campaign before that, which nobody talks about, is a campaign where there was this father who's at the airport and he's missing his daughter's birthday. So his wife orders a teddy bear on his behalf from Amazon, and it bombed hugely, right? Everything is right about it, emotionally correct.
Yeah,
so
it connects with people.
Yeah. So again, that's one of our learnings that, a lot of times we are ahead of the curve in this market, right? Because all the marketing theory, which has come from the West, right? A lot of brands, 90% of briefs right now, Akshay, is for building new categories, right? You're almost building a new category. You're not just building a brand. Using a brand, you're building a new category. In Spotify, I'm building a new category of streaming. For PhonePe, I'm building a new category of digital payments. For Amazon, I'm building a new category of e-commerce, right? But unfortunately, the marketing theory takes me far ahead. I'm celebrating an emotion which has come as a result of this product usage. The consumer is scratching their head, but what does this do? How do I download Spotify? What does it do? How do I make a playlist? What does streaming mean? Right? So we have learned the hard way that a lot of times we get ahead of the curve. Right. And therefore, a lot of our thinking model now is going back to zero. For a lot of platforms, brands, we actually now run very interestingly made education campaigns. And that has worked very well for us, which in a marketing parlance would be frowned upon. Oh, that's too basic to do. But we realized, as you were saying, that it's the basics which deliver the results.
True. Very interesting. One question, feel free not to answer it. Which is one campaign which has been always close to your heart? And you look back and say, this is my legacy campaign. If you had to pick one.
I don't know if I have already come to a legacy campaign, but I would say one of the ones that in the last 2-3 years that is close to my heart is a playlist for Spotify, right? Where we started with outdoor and we said, so the whole insight is that, India is a tough country. It's a Murphy Law country, right? I mean, you get out and things will go wrong, right? I mean, your train will not come on time. Something will happen. A car will go and dirty your clothes. So it's a Murphy Law country. If
electricity will go off, internet will break.
Yeah. I mean, Murphy was to be born, it would be born in India, right? So, but we said that music helps you hustle on, right? It doesn't do anything dramatic. It doesn't change your life, doesn't get you a girlfriend or whatever, but it helps you hustle on, right? So if you, for example, look at in Bombay, people get out of the metro and they all have their headphones and they're just hustling about their life. And we took that insight and we put 1,151 billboards, which were geo-targeted around the insight of that geography. So for example, in Bangalore, at the ISRO signal, we put up a hoarding saying, shooting for the moon. It's still stuck at signal. There's a playlist for that. In Dadar, in Bombay, we said, got here at the Dadar railway station, got here not by choice, but pushed out by chance. Right? Train harder, there's a playlist for that. So we ran this whole campaign, right, very geo-targeted, and took the chatter online from outdoor. So we use a very traditional medium, took the chatter online to a very new age medium, and there were memes, self-generated content, all of this. And that was the launch of Spotify India and got us to a very, very strong start, right? So
Fantastic.
Of the recent ones, that's very close to my heart.
How do you keep yourself energized? Because in creative field, you have to keep thinking, keep, experimenting. So what do you do which helps you break because it's very easy to fall in love with a campaign which you've done and then keep trying, repeating, taking variants out of that. So how do you, mentally tell yourself, now I'm breaking away from one campaign, jumping into another one, getting myself in the feet of what the brand wants, and then starting from there?
Yeah. I think one of the things which works for us is we always hire young people, right? And we empower them, right? And we give them the right to ask questions. We give them the right to create the work, right? So my entire pivoting of the agency last 4 years, Akshay, has been about, I am saying this is your agency. This is not my agency. I am not the leader. You are the leader, right? So this whole flipping of the table, right? Giving people ownership of the work, of the culture, of the agency, right? I think that works for us because, you have 400 people asking questions, right? They will make sure that you don't fail. So I think this flipping of the table, I would say, is the single most thing. And a lot of young talent on the floor who are always continuously thinking new, thinking afresh.
How do you deal with attrition?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think attrition this year would be strong as well. So in our business, we're doing two things, Akshay. One is, in advertising, and it's unfortunate that we were never learning organizations, right? We always took away from people, right? I mean, people came and we pretended that people learn on the job. Of course, they learn on the job, but there is something to be said about organized stimulus being provided. So one of my biggest push now is on learning and development, right? So we have strong tie-ups with platforms, Google, Facebook, etc., who are helping us train our workforce. We are running several programs. We just ran a big program on behavior economics. So one of my biggest things that if I keep people engaged on learning, if they are growing with me, they will stay with me. So that's one hypothesis, and that's paying off well, right? Second is remuneration. So we've just unrolled a new remuneration model for our top percentile talent, where we are saying that our base is to cover your inflation, and we are giving you your ability on predefined quantified KRAs to take your remuneration to 50% and more.
Wow.
Right? And we are saying you don't even need to sit through an appraisal cycle for it. It's all Excel sheet. If you've done those things, you can put the numbers by yourself. You will know how you've done, and that number is yours. So I'm trying to move to a remuneration system again, which is dramatic and meritocratic. So I feel that these are very, very different times, and it needs those kind of changes to be able to thrive.
Perfect. Last question, Neeraj, which we could also be guilty of. A lot of times clients come to agencies and clients are not clear what they want, or they keep changing the goalpost.
Yeah.
How do you deal with both the scenarios to say, and people assume that if they do a campaign that's a silver bullet, it'll solve all the problems.
Yeah.
So how do you also deal on that front when people expect that you will solve everything for them?
Yeah. So I keep telling my team as well, Akshay, that client is not supposed to be clear about the problem. It's our job. I mean, that's why we have strategists. That's our job. So bringing radical clarity is one of the fundamental jobs of our planners, of our strategists on the table, right? So, see, because you're muddled with your everyday business, your job is to, you go to a doctor, a person goes to a doctor, he or she will tell everything, no, I'm having a headache, my body is also aching. It's not the patient's job to diagnose themselves. If they would diagnose, they don't need a doctor, right? So I'm absolutely okay that the clients are not clear about what they need, because if they need it, they probably not need an agency like myself. They could go to a freelancer and get a film done, and they would succeed, right? So it's our job to clarify, and we've got so much of experience of building businesses, categories, that using all of that metadata, we should be able to diagnose better than the client in terms of what will unlock their growth. So we do that all the time. Our recommendations always are around business and what can solve problems, right? See, the issue also is that we work a lot with new age clients, right? And goalposts change genuinely internally. So you might be chasing something 3 months back and you're chasing something very different today. And that's all right. And we are equipped to be agile and to deal with it. What throws us off is when you're changing your mind on a whim and a fancy, right? And that becomes difficult, and we have our own mechanisms to deal with that. But beyond a point, some of those relationships don't go very well as well. So we would at some stage cut our loss and say, fine, I don't think we suit each other on that piece. But otherwise, the agency and the talent has been geared up to manage the chaos and agility, because that's how the world is today.
True, very well said. We are all dealing with volatility and uncertainty on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dheeraj.
Akshay, if you could tell our listeners, how can they connect with you on what handles social media platforms? How could they send you their thoughts or comments?
I would appreciate it if they can send it to me over LinkedIn. Quite active on that and quite actively post on LinkedIn also. So would look forward to people's comments, thoughts, anything they like to share on LinkedIn.
Amazing. And what would be your handle on LinkedIn, Akshay?
It's just Akshay Munjal.
Super. Thank you so much, Akshay. Amazing conversation, right? And we should catch up face to face soon enough.
Look forward to it. Whenever you're in Delhi, would love to invite you over.
We'll do that. Yes.
Thank
Amazing.
you.
Awesome. India is one of the few countries in the world with a fundamental right to education. This is guaranteed by our constitution. However, it has a long way to go when it comes to bridging the class divide that exists in education. The silver lining in this cloud is the rise of edtech companies aiming to make education accessible and affordable for the masses, thus fueling the dreams and aspirations of 1 billion into a reality. We have the youngest population in the world. This simply translates to a lot of us having big dreams and big aspirations. Akshay tells us that if we can't cater to the educational needs of this audience, our demographic asset can very quickly turn into a demographic nightmare. I found it interesting how assessments are nowadays being used not to grade and label learners like it was back in my days, but to really assess how much you've learned and to go back and spend time on topics that you haven't understood. I found that fascinating. I asked Akshay about his thoughts on being the next unicorn in the country. Akshay tells us that being a unicorn doesn't matter to him. He says that being a unicorn and having valuation is vanity. He only sees cash in hand, and he also thinks that long-term businesses are built slow and they need to have strong fundamentals. And finally, a great learning from Akshay on failures. He says if you don't fail enough, you are doing something wrong. Failure is the biggest teacher. In India, failure is classically looked down upon. We need to celebrate failure. It's a sign that you actually tried something new and hopefully you learned from it. Well, those are my learnings from today's conversation. What were yours? Do tag me on my Twitter handle Dheeraj_Sinha or leave your comments at speakeasywithdheerajsinha.com. If you like this podcast, you can explore other amazing podcasts on the IVM Podcast app and website. You can follow them on social media at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for listening.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcasts. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.
Don't you think that if everyone around you is getting smart, you better be smarter? Hey there, I'm the traveling professor Siddharth Deshmukh and I'm back with season 2 of my podcast to make you smarter. Smarter with Sid. What's this season's focus about? Well, it's about 10-minute nuggets that will make you stand out at work. It's time to go from smart to smarter. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday and become smarter with Sid.